Okay, there's this issue that has been plaguing the state of Utah in recent years. It's been a source of great discussion with our legislature. And in a recent poll that we did with the Salt Lake Tribune, we found out about 32% of people in the state of Utah know someone with an opioid addiction problem. It is a very real thing in the state of Utah, and people are trying to get to it. Let's just kind of go down the line a little bit, starting with you, Terry, for just a moment, about this problem itself and some of the efforts to get to it.
It's chronic. You know, opioid really is the chief pain medication that's prescribed by doctors to handle any kind of pain management, from an accident, from chronic pain. And we know there's a problem in Utah. We know sort of culturally that there's a problem as well, because it's kind of an accepted drug, right? It's something that the doctor prescribes. It's not an illegal substance necessarily, but it does have street value. And when you're addicted, you're in a horrible situation that takes years and lots of therapy and lots of other kinds of therapies to get out of. I think that one of the things we don't talk about enough in Utah are alternative forms of pain management and pain medication. And one of them, it's not the only one, but one of them is medical marijuana. We had three bills in the legislature that were signed and passed dealing with opioid abuse, but we sort of passed on medical marijuana. Now we have an Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions, who wants to crack down on recreational use of marijuana and possibly medical use as well. I think that we need to, as a state, look at other forms of pain management for people who are in chronic pain or need pain management of some kind before we're ever going to crack the opioid problem.
I think that there's a cultural problem, but I think if we even go back to the doctor's office where they're so willing to give these out, I don't know if they're willing to please or they want to make their patients happy or they're getting kickbacks from the drug companies, but too often you go to the doctor's office and it's too easy to get these drugs. And there are there's research out there that shows that the way these drugs are prescribed, that it makes you addicted. And I think that if we just stop that gap and just say, okay, let's go get you an appointment at your chiropractor, or let's give you some yoga, or figure out, like you said, medical marijuana, other options that are out there. I just think that we're so quick to jump to these opioids that we're creating this monster that it's hard to back out of.
Yeah, I mean, your upstanding Utah, suburbanites aren't going to, get a spoon and a needle and shoot up heroin, but opioids, as Terry mentioned, are widely accepted and insidious, and they get in there, and it's very easy to become addicted to them. One of the bills that I think is very interesting that the legislature passed is set standards trying to minimize the prescription of these opioids, because there have been states that have tried that and they've seen drastic, I think 50% drops in the number of opioids prescribed. So you're prescribing more to the level of pain and not just giving them 30 pills, that then they can go out and sell.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of it. I think but I think Big Pharma has been pumping these opioids into our communities for years. I mean, they've been the drug pushers of this epidemic, and really need to take some accountability and look at what their role has been. I mean, the way they've put fentanyl and some of these other very dangerous drugs into communities is just shocking. So, but I guess the good point is that we're talking about it at this point.
Yeah, we need to be.
And the president has, as you mentioned, taking some initiative to try to reduce it, and other steps that are being taken. But yeah, it's a big problem, and it's not going away on its own.
Speaking of big problem not going away on its own, I was very surprised to see a news article about Utah having the largest wage gap in the country.
That's a problem.
71 cents on the dollar for women in the workplace in the state of Utah, which is less than the United States itself.
Maybe they need to start selling opioids on the side. Joking, sorry.
It's just a bad idea, and I think that goes back to culture here in Utah too. I know a lot of people like to blame that women are making less money because maybe they've chosen to stay at home with their children or they're not as educated. But when they do these studies, they're actually looking at people who are, apples to apples, not apples to oranges. And we just don't think highly enough of women in this state. And I think that women have important voices, and we need to start paying them what their value is and what they're worth. And I think that when you give them that level of respect, you'll get more out of them, and I think it will help companies, businesses, and the state's bottom line.
Well, that's absolutely right. How do we get to that? Is there a legislative solution to this?
More women in positions of power, more women in political offices. I would like to say that men are smart enough to have this on their radar and do something about it, but mostly they're not. I mean, they're not thinking about it as much as they could be. If we didn't elect a lot of female lawmakers and a female president in this last election cycle, and that was an issue for them. If we had more women in positions of power, if we had more women in political office, the wage gap would shrink.
I will say that there are familial issues at stake here, because women do take time out of the workplace, and they do fall behind as a result of that. Fewer of them finish college in Utah as a result of having children and so forth. But that said, there was legislation this past session that Representative Angela Romero was sponsoring that would have given at least state workers paid time off, and then they can go back into the workplace and make that transition a lot more smoothly, instead of dropping out of the workplace and then having to catch up later on. That bill didn't pass. There was a bill to do a study on on the wage gap, and that bill didn't pass. There are things that can be done, but they're not being done at this point. And this is just one data point on sort of a broader spectrum and a broader discussion, because Utah has a very low rate of women in leadership positions in business and in government. We have a very low rate of women who are taking management positions and on that track. And so we've got all of these other signals that say that we have a real disparity in the way we treat men and women. And part of it is cultural, I think, but also part of it is societal.
Yeah. Men can make a decision, though. They're the ones who are usually deciding what the salary is. And if you think about it, you've got a wife at home. If your wife is working, do you want her making a fair wage, or would you like her not making very much and not being able to help pay the bills? My husband wants me to make a fair wage. I'm pretty sure of it.
Sociologists and demographers I've talked to have also said that women often go into lower paying positions, and so there may be some of that reflected here too. They're more likely to be teachers rather than doctors or attorneys. Now that said, I believe at the University of Utah, the law school for one of the first times has a majority female class this year, and that's a good sign. That means we're going in the right direction. It's going to take us a long time to get there.
For sure.
I need to correct myself. We're not the lowest. One of the lowest, which helps so
Rolling around
much,
the bottom of the
right?
barrel.
Yeah, it's rolling to the bottom. But I appreciate your insights on this, because we do need to be talking about this, just like the other things we talked on the show. We have to be addressing this.
You guys should start by paying Heidi as much as you pay us.
That's right. What, you guys
Indeed,
get paid?
indeed. Thank you so much for your comments and your insights today.